Have you ever wondered if what you call reality is actually a construction? And what if I told you that Plato and Descartes predicted the existence of virtual reality long before it became a part of our everyday lives? That's right. What you know as the real world might just be an illusion manipulated by invisible forces. And the most interesting part is that you're trapped in it without even realizing it. Yes, the Matrix is closer to us than you think. Before we dive in, if you're interested in topics like this and want more content about self-awareness, the mysteries of the universe, and personal transformation, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. And you, who always believed you were in control, have you ever stopped to think if you're truly living your life or if you're just another puppet in this theater of illusions? The good news is that, just like Plato and Descartes suggested, it is possible to escape this trap. Now, here's the best part. You can learn how to hack the Matrix and free your consciousness. Curious? Then keep reading and discover how to awaken to the truth. Globe Showing Europe Africa Controlled Illusion. The first time you realize the illusion of what we call reality is a surprising moment of awakening. The reality that everyone believes to know is actually a construct manipulated by an invisible control system. From the thoughts that arise in our minds to the events that seem to unfold before us, everything is part of an orchestrated dance. It's not that things don't exist. They exist in a controlled frequency, limited by the perception the system wants us to have. Imagine you're in control of a video game, but you don't know that you're the one holding the joystick. This control we feel over our lives is actually a disguised prison. The controlled life, with its rules and limitations, creates the false sense of freedom. When you look at the world, everything seems so normal, right? But what if I told you that you're just accepting the reality that was given to you? This is not something from a science fiction movie. It's a control cycle that the Matrix imposes on us. And those who don't question it remain there in a deep sleep. Awakening isn't a struggle. It's realizing that we were never truly imprisoned. It's hard to accept, I know. But once you start to realize that the limits of your reality are not real, the awakening begins. And this isn't something that happens overnight. It's a gradual process, where by questioning, you begin to exit the illusion, this false reality that was set up for you. This is the first step to escaping the system and starting on a path of self-knowledge. And believe me, liberation is not just in the mind, but an emotional energy you choose to release as you distance yourself from this matrix. But what comes after this awakening? High Voltage The Matrix explained the matrix is not just a science fiction idea, but an energetic construct that governs existence. It is present in every part of our reality, shaping human consciousness through frequency and limits of perception. Imagine a computer screen with such low resolution that you can't see the full image. That's how our view of reality is filtered. The true vastness of the universe is hidden by this limitation imposed by the control system. Our perception of the world, the emotions we feel, and even the thoughts that arise are all influenced by this invisible energetic field. It might be hard to believe, right? But when you stop and reflect on moments in your life where something seemed out of place, you start to notice when we were more connected to our essence, we were more intuitive, freer. So, what happens over time? The system narrows our vision of life, creating a false reality, an invisible limitation. For example, our perception of time and events is manipulated to keep us in a continuous cycle of action and reaction, leaving no room for us to look beyond this illusion. The reality we live in is filtered, like a veil that prevents us from seeing true freedom. The secret is in recognizing that the matrix, this control system, only exists because we accept its rules. But once you start to notice these distortions, you begin to loosen the invisible chains that bind you. And from the moment this happens, your perception of the world around you begins to expand. It's no longer about what others dictate as truth, but about the frequency and energy you choose to vibrate. This, my friend, is just the beginning of true liberation. Lightbulb, the control mechanisms of the matrix are closely tied to the emotional energy we generate. When you feel fear, joy, sadness, or even hope, you are creating emotional energy that is harvested and used to sustain the system. The cycle is simple, yet powerful. You experience emotions. The system feeds off that energy and in return offers temporary relief. This cycle of struggle and brief relief keeps everyone in a constant search for something more, without ever truly finding real peace. It's like running on a treadmill. You exert yourself, but never get anywhere. Let's imagine a practical example. How many times have you felt trapped in a cycle of seeking external satisfaction? It could be through consumption, social approval, or even the search for happiness in material things. The system teaches us to associate happiness and fulfillment with external factors, when in fact, the true source lies within us. And this is exactly what the control system wants you to forget. It feeds on your emotional energy, diverting your focus from the true freedom that comes with understanding your inner power. When you start to notice this cycle and understand how your emotions are being manipulated, you gain the power to break the system. It's not about eliminating emotion, but becoming aware of how it is being used. Once you understand the control mechanisms, your perception changes. You begin to make more conscious decisions rather than reacting automatically. And this shift in perception, it starts to transform not only your emotions, but your reality. But by understanding this, are you ready to perceive what comes next after this control cycle? Hourglass not done time in reality. The way we perceive time is one of the most powerful illusions within the Matrix. Time, as we know it, is a construct designed to keep our consciousness in a cycle of cause and effect, making us believe that we are constantly progressing. But the true nature of time is much more fluid and vast. The concept of past, present, and future limits our perception and prevents us from seeing the totality of now, where all creation occurs. And this limitation is exactly what the control system wants you to believe. Think of a moment when you were so immersed in a task that you lost track of time. In that state, you weren't trapped by the linearity of time. You were in a state of flow. This type of experience happens when your consciousness is outside of the system's control, free to operate in a more expansive way. But the system constantly reinforces the idea that time is something that must be managed and controlled, making you feel a constant pressure. The truth is that time, as we perceive it, is just a limitation of our consciousness. And this limited perception prevents us from accessing the vast potential of freedom that exists beyond this illusion. When you start to question the nature of time, you begin to free your consciousness from the imposed cycle. The simple act of slowing down and connecting with the present allows you to experience reality in a more expansive and authentic way. Time, as we were taught to see it, is nothing but an artificial construct to keep our attention on the future and lack. By realizing this, you begin to create new realities, free from the control of time. So, what would you do if you knew that time is not as real as it seems? Brain's subtle control of the matrix is not exercised in an obvious way, but rather through subtle mechanisms that govern our lives. It's not just the external rules that limit us, but the unconscious beliefs and patterns we accept without questioning. These patterns were implanted so subtly that we don't even realize we're obeying them. Every time we follow a social norm or feel compelled to act in a certain way due to environmental influence, we're reinforcing the control system. This happens without us noticing, creating a constant feedback loop that keeps the illusion alive and strong. This subtle control hides in our everyday actions. When you buy something without really needing it, when you accept a behavioral standard without thinking, you're being influenced by an invisible control system. Sometimes, the simplest habits are the hardest to notice. For example, when you follow a path you've always taken, without even questioning why you do it, you're operating within a mold of reality. And this isn't by chance. The system takes advantage of repetition and conformity to keep minds distracted and controlled. However, the first step to freeing yourself from this subtle control is to question. Start questioning the patterns you follow without thinking. What habits do you repeat without noticing? What beliefs do you hold that really don't make sense for your essence? When you begin to free yourself from these invisible norms, a new field of possibilities opens up. True freedom comes when you stop reacting automatically to the world's expectations and begin to act with more awakened awareness. What do you think would happen if you took control of your life and started creating your own rules? Thought balloon perception and the subconscious, our perception of the world is extremely limited and often distorted due to the power of the subconscious. What we see, feel, and believe is filtered through a lens that carries the programming of past generations and societal influences. The subconscious, in turn, is like a database that stores these beliefs, fears, and behavioral patterns that we don't question. Often, we think we're making conscious decisions, but in reality, we're just reacting to a set of predetermined stimuli. And this perception game keeps us trapped in a version of reality that doesn't align with our true nature. When you start observing your own reactions and thoughts, you may notice how many of them don't come from a conscious choice, but from an automatic response. If you've ever found yourself repeating behaviors or feeling trapped in familiar patterns, then you know how easy it is to fall into the traps of the subconscious. The control system uses these patterns to keep us within a narrow spectrum of perception, making our reality seem immutable. The good news is that by becoming aware of this, you begin to create a new perception, one that is freer and more aligned with your true self. The secret to transforming this limited perception is to bring awareness to these patterns and question them. By doing so, you can begin to reprogram your subconscious and, with that, change the way you perceive reality. This can be done through practices like meditation, deep reflection, or even the simple act of observing without judgment. How could you apply this concept to your life? Which patterns could you start questioning in order to create a more true and expansive perception of your own reality? Cyclone emotional control. Emotions are a powerful tool within the matrix. They are the key that keeps people trapped in the system because, when dominated, they can generate an immense amount of emotional energy that the system collects and uses to sustain itself. Fear, anger, sadness, but also joy and hope are emotions that create high-frequency energy, which, when misdirected, directly feeds a control cycle. The constant fluctuation between emotional highs and lows creates fertile ground for the system to remain strong, as it keeps people engaged in a continuous cycle of struggle and relief. Imagine that you feel powerless in a situation, such as a financial problem or a relationship conflict. Fear and anxiety arise, and you begin to feel trapped by these emotions. What happens in that moment is that your emotional energy is being captured by the matrix, keeping you trapped in the suffering cycle. Instead of using that energy to free yourself, you end up reinforcing the chains that bind you. The key here is learning how to manage your emotions and, instead of reacting automatically, realizing the power they hold and using that energy consciously. When you become aware of the power of your emotions, you can begin to transform them into tools for liberation. Instead of being carried away by fear or anger, you can use those emotions to create vibrant energy for change. A simple example would be, when feeling fear, instead of allowing it to consume you, using that emotion as fuel to act more focused and with courage. By doing this, you not only break the control cycle, but you also begin to raise your frequency, creating a new reality for yourself. What would happen if you started to see your emotions not as enemies, but as allies in the liberation process? Counterclockwise arrows button reincarnation and the cycle of control, the idea of reincarnation, in many cases, is seen as an opportunity for renewal, but within the matrix, it serves as a mechanism for continuous control. Instead of being a journey of growth and liberation, reincarnation often becomes a repetition of old patterns. Every time a soul is reborn, it enters the same illusion again, forgetting the lessons of past lives and being guided back into control cycle. The amnesia that accompanies reincarnation keeps souls trapped, unaware that they are repeating the same mistakes and patterns. Imagine you're in a movie, and every time it ends, you start all over again without remembering anything from what happened before. This is more or less how the reincarnation cycle works within the matrix. Souls are guided back into the illusion, where they don't have access to knowledge of past lives, and thus they are once again carried by the invisible chains of the system. This creates a continuous cycle of learning without true evolution, where true liberation is never achieved but postponed. However, by realizing that this reincarnation cycle is a tool of the control system, you can begin to free yourself from it. By becoming aware of your life patterns, the lessons left unlearned, and the energies that still need to be released, you start breaking the cycle. It's not about denying reincarnation, but understanding its role within the matrix and how you can choose to live more consciously and transformatively. What would happen if, instead of feeling trapped in this cycle, You began to act as though every life was an opportunity for true liberation. Light bulb breaking free escaping the matrix is not about fighting, but about understanding. True liberation begins when you recognize that there are no physical chains holding you, but rather a distorted view of reality. What keeps you trapped is the belief that you're limited by something external. However, as soon as your consciousness expands, you realize that the key to freedom has always been within you. What is needed, then, is a deep awakening, where you start seeing reality in an entirely new way. By raising your frequency, you begin to perceive that control over your life was never really about external forces, but about how you choose to interact with your own energy. For example, imagine you have a fixed idea that you need to fight for everything in life. For money, for status, for recognition. This is a reflection of the control system that makes you believe that life needs to be a constant battle. However, when you start to realize that life can be lived in flow, in harmony, you begin to release the binds that keep you in this cycle of struggle. Breaking free from the control system isn't about going to a physical place, but changing the way you connect with your own energy and the world around you. The first step to this liberation is awareness. When you start to notice the control mechanisms, you can free yourself from the programming that kept you trapped. The frequency you vibrate at, the choices you make, the emotions you choose to express, all of this begins to change. By raising your vibration, you not only break free from the control cycle, but you also begin to live according to your true nature. Now, you might ask yourself, what would happen if you allowed yourself to see beyond the illusions and truly connect with your essence? Seedling paths to freedom, there are many ways to break free from the control cycle of the matrix, and they can be divided into two main approaches, minimalism and maximalism. Minimalism involves simplifying life, letting go of illusions and needs imposed by society. By removing excess, you get closer to your essence, realizing that true freedom comes within, not from the things we own or external expectations. On this path, you learn to live with less, not because you have fewer options, but because by letting go of materialism, you create space for a deeper perception of life. On the other hand, maximalism seeks to expand and create your own reality through conscious manifestation. Instead of reducing life, you amplify it. Understand that the universe is at your disposal to create new possibilities. When you realize the power of your consciousness to shape reality, you begin to act in a more expansive way. It's like an artist who, instead of just observing the blank canvas, starts drawing and painting according to their inner vision. Both approaches, minimalism and maximalism, require you to understand the control that the system exerts over you and seek full autonomy over your energy and consciousness. Both paths are valid, depending on what resonates more with your personal journey. What really matters is that, in both cases, you begin to free yourself from the limitations and illusions the control system imposed. By mastering your energy and consciousness, you begin to act in harmony with the natural flow of the universe, creating a reality where the perception of scarcity and struggle disappears. Now, the question is, which of these paths would resonate more with your inner truth, and what would you do to take the first step? If this message resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can continue your journey of awakening with us. Let's explore the mysteries of the universe together and take the first step towards true freedom.